The interface is beautiful, the app runs fast, the features roll out weekly, and yet users leave. Feedback plummets. Engagement dries up. What happened? In today's product culture, success is often measured in velocity. How quickly can you ship? How lean is your build? How many tickets closed this sprint? There's little room for silence, much less for philosophy. The assumption is simple. If the code works, the job is done. But what if that assumption is flawed? We live in an era of high-functioning tools built on low-functioning values. Apps designed with dazzling polish still promote addiction. Features meant to connect quietly isolate. Recommendation systems optimize for retention but deepen division. Somehow, in our rush to build the future, we forgot to ask the most important questions about what that future should be. This is where Socrates enters, not as a developer but as a reminder. Socrates famously never wrote code. He never launched a product or pitched a roadmap. But he did practice something that our industry sorely lacks: the courage to slow down and question everything. Not to criticize, but to clarify. Not to delay progress, but to protect its meaning. Imagine just for a moment if we applied his method not to ancient virtue, but to modern tech. Before the prototype, why does this need to exist? Before the algorithm, whose values are being encoded here? Before the feature release, who benefits and who doesn't? These are not questions that fit neatly into a Jira ticket. They are questions that make the room go quiet. They are inconvenient, often unprofitable, but they are essential. Because behind every broken product is not just broken code. It's a chain of unexamined assumptions, written not in bugs, but in silence. And when no one asks why, someone always pays the price. So maybe the question is not, can we build it fast? Maybe it's, should we have built it at all? That's not a question for QA, that's a question for philosophy. And philosophy begins, like all meaningful code, with a clean prompt line, why? To invoke Socrates today is to risk misunderstanding. His name is often thrown into workshops and innovation talks as shorthand for asking smart questions. But Socratic thinking is not brainstorming. It is not devil's advocacy. It is not posturing as clever while hiding ignorance behind polished rhetoric. Socratic questioning is a discipline, a way of dismantling assumptions layer by layer, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Its goal is not to win, but to understand, to strip away the false until what remains is something you can stand on. This method begins not with answers, but with unknowing. I know that I know nothing, Socrates once said. That is not modesty, it is strategy. Because in the domain of certainty, change is impossible, but in the space of doubt, everything becomes open to improvement. In tech, we often equate intelligence with speed. The faster the mind, the better the product. But Socrates teaches a different kind of intelligence, one that pauses, one that does not rush to synthesize or simplify, one that treats each assumption like a fragile line of code, to be debugged, not defended. Socratic thinking does not serve efficiency, it serves clarity. It forces us to confront the things we usually hide behind jargon. When we say user-friendly, do we mean truly empowering or just easily addictive? When we call it frictionless, do we mean accessible or impossible to resist? When we measure engagement, are we tracking value or just attention? These questions don't fit the logic of OKRs or quarterly growth charts, but they do fit the logic of integrity. And that's what makes them powerful. In a Socratic framework, building software isn't just about knowing how to build, it's about knowing why you build and whether that why can survive examination. The genius of Socrates was not that he had the answers, it's that he never stopped asking better questions. And in a world drowning in products but starved for purpose, maybe that's the intelligence we need most. Every engineer knows the ritual, the code review, a second pair of eyes to catch what we missed, bugs, logic gaps, style violations. We scrutinize the syntax, assess the structure, debate naming conventions. But here's a deeper question. When was the last time we reviewed ourselves with the same rigor? In the world of software, we treat clean code as virtue. But virtue for Socrates was never about outward polish. It was about inward alignment. A life lived without self-examination, he argued, was not just incomplete. It was dangerous. Because without scrutiny, the worst ideas hide in plain sight, disguised as best practices. Socratic thinking invites us to perform a different kind of review. Not code linting, but conscience linting. Not unit testing, but value testing. And this kind of debugging begins in silence. It begins when a developer pauses before implementing that dark pattern, even though the conversion rate looks promising. It begins when a designer questions whether stickiness is just a euphemism for psychological manipulation. It begins when a founder reconsiders whether blitzscaling is just reckless growth in disguise. This self-review is not easy. It slows you down. It stings. It can make you doubt things you once believed in. Your roadmap, your strategy, your role in the system. But Socrates didn't promise comfort. He promised clarity. And clarity is rare in systems designed for noise. To debug yourself is to ask, am I shipping this because it's right, or because I fear being left behind? Am I designing for the user or for the KPI? If no one saw my work but I had to live with its consequences, would I still be proud of it? These are not abstract questions. They have real-world consequences. Because before bad products are made, bad reasoning is left unchallenged. And before bad reasoning takes hold, someone chooses silence over scrutiny. In this sense, every product is also a mirror. It reflects not just what we know, but what we chose not to question. Socrates believed that self-knowledge was the foundation of all wisdom, not because it made you powerful, but because it made you honest. In tech, where influence often outpaces introspection, that honesty is not a luxury, it's a responsibility. And maybe the real technical debt isn't just in the backlog. Maybe it's the ethical debt we accrue when we stop reviewing not just the product, but the person building it. Silicon Valley loves to celebrate builders. The motto is everywhere: move fast, break things. But rarely does it ask, who pays for what we break? In an industry obsessed with progress, questioning is seen as friction. Asking why slows the roadmap. Raising ethical concerns delays launches. Dissent is reframed as negativity. Yet, history shows, when we don't ask enough questions, we don't just build faster. We build blindly. Think of the apps that maximize time spent rather than time well spent. Think of platforms that polarize public discourse, not because of bad intentions, but because no one questioned what the engagement metric actually incentivized. Think of algorithms that amplify bias because no one asked, what are we training this model to believe about the world? When we don't question deeply, we optimize wrongly. When we optimize wrongly, we scale harm. Features are not neutral. Every like button is a value judgment. Every notification is a nudge. Every UI flow teaches behavior, consciously or not. When designers and developers fail to reflect, they don't just design experiences, they design environments of meaning, environments that shape thought, attention, identity. That's why Socratic questioning isn't a luxury in tech. It's a necessary discipline. It shifts the design process from, can we make this easier to click, to, should we make this easier to click? From, will this increase user retention? To, what does it mean to retain someone in this system? From, what pain points can we eliminate? To, Which frictions are essential for dignity, choice, or reflection? Because not all friction is bad. Sometimes friction is the only thing standing between autonomy and addiction. And not all delight is good. Sometimes delight is the mask that hides manipulation. We need more than smarter tools. We need wiser builders. Builders who understand that every product is a set of choices, and every choice, a philosophy. That how we build is inseparable from why we build. And that good intentions are not enough if we never interrogate our assumptions. So the question isn't whether questioning alone can build better code. The question is whether we're brave enough to let questioning reshape what better even means. Technology has no shortage of frameworks. Agile promises speed. Lean promises focus. Design thinking promises empathy. Each offers a method for moving forward, faster, smoother, smarter. But none of them ask what Socrates would have considered the first and most necessary question. Should we move forward at all? That's the missing piece. Not a better tool set, but a better foundation. Not more velocity, but more vision. In an industry obsessed with execution, we've perfected how to build, but not why. And so we need a different kind of blueprint, not another system for sprint planning, but a philosophy for building responsibly, one that doesn't begin with the user journey or the feature backlog, but with conscience. This is where the Socratic approach begins, not by defining the next release, but by asking whether it should be built in the first place. Most products today are launched on assumptions that there is a pain point, a demand, a gap waiting to be filled. But Socratic thinking resists that urgency. It starts with reflection, with uncomfortable questions that rarely make it into the kickoff meeting. Why does this product deserve to exist? Whose values are we encoding into its design? Are we solving a real problem, or manufacturing one that justifies what we already want to build? These are not theoretical dilemmas. They are design decisions in disguise. Every step in the build process, from mock-ups to code, from onboarding to monetization, carries a set of invisible ethics. And if those ethics go unexamined, they will shape the world anyway. To embed Socratic thinking into the build process is to change not just what we produce, but how we think while producing it. It means slowing down during design reviews, to ask whether we are empowering or manipulating. It means challenging metrics like engagement and retention, not to discard them, but to ask what kinds of behaviors we're really reinforcing. It means assigning not just roles like product manager or tech lead, but someone responsible for holding the mirror. A question keeper. A human reminder that just because something is possible does not mean it is wise. This is not an anti-progress stance. On the contrary, it's progress with intention. Because a product that grows without reflection is not scaling value, it's scaling assumptions. And assumptions, left unchecked, can turn even the most elegant interface into a delivery system for harm. After launch, Socratic reflection doesn't stop. In fact, that's when it becomes most urgent. Success in tech is often defined by metrics, DAU, retention, LTV. But growth is not always good. Viruses grow, addiction grows, influence grows unchecked if no one stops to ask what exactly is being amplified. The right question is not just, did it work? But, what have we now introduced into the world? And if every product leaves behind a cultural residue, some changed habit, some normalized behavior, what are we willing to take responsibility for? None of this will help a company move faster. It will not help them pitch cleaner decks or meet quarterly projections. But it may help them sleep at night. It may help them build products that don't just function but endure, because they were created with clarity, not just creativity. And perhaps in a world increasingly defined by automated decisions, the most radical thing we can do is reintroduce the examined life into the center of innovation. Because Socrates was right. The unexamined life is not worth living. And in this century, the unexamined product is not worth launching. Of course, there will be pushback. The moment you introduce Socratic questioning into a fast-paced product environment, someone will object. This isn't practical. And on some level, they're right. The Socratic method isn't designed for speed. It doesn't scale easily. It doesn't fit neatly into agile ceremonies or investor updates. In fact, its very nature is disruptive, designed to slow things down, make people uncomfortable, delay answers in order to deepen understanding. And in a world driven by metrics, efficiency, and competitive pressure, that feels like friction. But what if friction is the point? Most of the worst decisions in technology weren't made because people lacked intelligence. They happened because no one stopped to ask the hard questions, because the pressure to ship overrode the responsibility to reflect, because go-to-market became more important than go-to-sleep with a clear conscience. The argument that questioning isn't practical only holds if your definition of practicality is limited to short-term outcomes. If your horizon is a quarter, then yes, philosophy slows you down. But if your horizon is society, if your metric is human dignity, if your benchmark is the kind of world your work contributes to, then Socratic inquiry becomes not a distraction, but a compass. It's easy to dismiss deep questioning as a luxury, but history shows that some of the most disastrous systems, from surveillance capitalism to addictive UX loops, began with teams who moved too fast and never stopped to ask, what are we really building here? It's not that they were evil, it's that they were efficient without being awake. The truth is, the Socratic approach doesn't reject action. It just insists on alignment. It demands that the builder and the product be coherent, that the person writing the code can stand behind its impact without hiding behind metrics, incentives, or industry norms. That doesn't make them saints. It just makes them responsible. And yes, responsibility is hard. It's not always rewarded. It doesn't show up in growth graphs, but it accumulates, quietly, persistently, as trust, as conscience, as the knowledge that you didn't just build something that worked. You built something that deserved to exist. Socrates would not have made a great product manager. He asked too many questions, gave too few answers, refused to move on until the foundation was solid. But perhaps that's exactly what the industry needs more of. Not fewer deliverables, but deeper deliberation. Not faster launches, but more thoughtful legacies. Not more features, but more wisdom. So when someone says this isn't practical, what they often mean is, this will make me uncomfortable. And maybe that's the signal that you're on the right path. Because in an age of algorithmic speed, slowness can be an act of courage. And in a culture of certainty, questioning is an act of rebellion. And in a system built to scale, conscience may be the only thing that can't be outsourced. So what does it mean to build better code? Not just faster, not just cleaner, not just more scalable. It means code that comes from a mind willing to be examined, a process that begins with hesitation, not as weakness, but as wisdom. It means building like Socrates lived, unafraid to question, unwilling to pretend, and deeply committed to the belief that clarity must come before creation. In this light, the examined product is not a finished thing. It is a practice, a continuous discipline of asking not just what works, but what matters. Not just who uses it, but who is changed by it. Not just how we grow, but what kind of world we are growing into. And when the dust settles, when the pitch decks are archived and the tools replaced, what remains is not the velocity of our launches, but the integrity of our questions. What remains is whether we had the courage to stop, to doubt, to listen. Whether we wrote code not only with skill, but with self-awareness. Whether we were willing to be wrong in pursuit of being more right. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Today, in our hands, that becomes the unexamined product is not worth building. And maybe, just maybe, in a world defined by relentless automation, ethical shortcuts, and feature creep, asking why is no longer a detour. It's the destination.